Hey guys, it's Sam, and this is my spoiler-free review of House of Salt and Sorrows by Erin A Craig. This is a standalone YA, I would say gothic horror novel. This is a retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses fairy tale, but I've read another 12 Dancing Princesses retelling. I'm not familiar with the original, like, myth, folklore, fairy tale. I've never read the original, but I've only read retellings, and this is definitely like a very dark retelling of that and has much more going on that's like horror-wise. So this follows our main character of Annabelle, and she is the, I think, 6th daughter in line, I want to say. So there used to be 12 sisters, but 3 of them at the start of the novel have already died some like weird tragic death. And very quickly after the most recent one has died, Annabelle starts to kind of be like, I think something more nefarious is going on here. So then we start to kind of see things as she starts to sort of unravel like what might be happening within this story. So there's sort of like your typical horror novel triggers in here. So there's like death of family, sisters, things like that. There's ghost stuff in here. So like some horror imagery. There's like some gore and just violence and just like a general feeling of unease the entire time. So this is about as horror-ish as I get. I did end up enjoying this. I'll talk about that, but this is like about as scary as I can get, but if you are really spooked by stuff, kind of look at some of the reviews of it. So first off, I'm talking about the world building. This is set in a world that is like, you know, sort of fantastical. They have like gods and things like that that are real, that will like walk among them, but this particular area is like an island part of this like nation, I guess you could say, and her dad is like in charge of it and everything, and they worship like a sea god that sort of looks like a Poseidon-y type character, but they worship like the salt and the sea and stuff. So there's a lot of imagery of just like salt, underwater animals, like there's weird like octopus imagery because that's like their symbol like for their family, and like all of this kind of like seaside gothic imagery throughout. And then like I said, this is like ultimately kind of a ghost story. Like it's not quite a ghost story, it's sort of a spin on a ghost story, but that would be more spoiler territory, so I'm not going to get into that. But like there are definitely like ghostly imagery. I haven't seen this movie, but this almost gave me like Crimson Peak type gothic vibes, because I know that movie is like less of a horror movie and more like the ghosts are the scary part, and that's kind of what happens here too. Like there are ghost images and like ghostly things happening, and this sense of like not really knowing what's real because the characters don't know what's real. There's a lot of like tricks of the mind. Is there weird dream stuff? Is it real? Is it a dream? What's real? What's fake? Like all of this just like general unease throughout, and that's like a huge part of the world building, is that it's very atmospheric, and just like the level of like the entire time is like the biggest part of the story. Next, I'm gonna talk about our characters. I liked our main character of Annabelle. I keep saying the character's name is Annabelle, and it's Anna Lee, I just checked. So I liked our main character of Anna Lee, and she was just like, she was trying to figure things out, and you felt like even when she messed up, it wasn't like, you didn't want to be like, oh my god, you're being so stupid. Like she was never really being like super stupid. She definitely did some things with like some of the ghost stuff where you're like, why are you going down that like hallway? But like it all makes sense for like the gothic horror setting. I didn't really get a sense of her sisters or like caring super much about her sisters. So like that was a whole thing. But what I will say is another really interesting point of this story was like, I never really knew like who to like pin some of this stuff on. Like there's a ton of like almost red herrings. There's some situations where like she's going after and thinking like, oh, this person is who's causing all this stuff, and like it's very blatantly wrong. But generally speaking, like I never was like, oh, this is the root of all the problems. Like as far as characters to trust throughout, I was like, I don't know who to trust, and any of these people could be like kind of bad. So this was a really great exploration of like really sort of like gray characters, because there were so many that you're like, I don't know who's like good in this situation. So like throughout, I didn't really know what the source of the mystery was. So it wasn't you sitting there being like, oh my god, Annalie, like figure it out. It was very like, I don't know, like the entire time, which was good. There is a love story in here that I didn't really like. Like that was the element that was a little bit too like sort of insta-lovey, but then I was also like, well, is that part of like the plot? Like, so the insta-love sort of thing made sense because there's also this element of like, I don't know if I trust him like either. So there's all of that, but that part was probably like weaker to me, and the way that like that wrapped up was a little bit like, I didn't really need that. Lastly, I'm gonna talk about the plot, which I kind of already did. Like I said, it's just very engaging throughout. There's lots of just like creepy elements. I will say that I thought that there were parts that like, nothing that really dragged, because I read this in 3 days, which for me, like working full-time these days is it just doesn't happen anymore. But I read this in 3 days because I was like on the edge of my seat about it, just like I wanted to keep reading. So there were parts I wouldn't say that like dragged, but in comparison to the very end, like the end, a lot of stuff happened so quickly that wasn't fully explained, and I'm kind of like, the ending wrapped up like too quick and had some like really outlandish magical things that happened. So I'm like, I don't really love that, because we were keeping this like, yes, it's magical, but like not super magical, and then the end has like a lot of that. And I didn't feel like it was woven in enough throughout the story for me to really like believe the ending stuff quite as much as I would have liked to. But I still really like the story. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, so I really enjoyed it. And I am going to do a discussion on it, I think. I wasn't going to, but as I was sitting here talking, I was like, I want to sort of talk about some of these elements. So I'm going to be doing a quick discussion on this, and I will link that on the screen for you guys to check out if you've read the book. So comment down below, let me know what you thought of House of Salt and Sorrows. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye.